What if the very thing you've been avoiding is the key to your next level of growth? What if every piece of criticism, every uncomfortable comment, every review, every moment of feedback that stings, was actually a hidden map pointing you toward your highest potential? Most people dread criticism. They take it personally, react defensively, or shut down completely. But the truth is, feedback is one of the most powerful accelerators of personal and professional development, if you know how to use it. The greatest leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs all share one trait. They've learned to separate ego from improvement. They don't see criticism as rejection but as information, data that helps them refine, adapt, and grow faster than the rest. This audiobook will show you how to do the same. You'll discover how to transform feedback from something painful into something profoundly empowering. You'll learn to process critique calmly, respond with clarity, and turn every evaluation, good or bad, into a tool for growth. By the end, you won't just handle feedback. You'll master it. Chapter 1: The Mindset Shift, From Pain to Gain. Every journey of growth begins with a mindset shift, and mastering feedback is no different. The truth is, criticism hurts because it strikes at something deeply human, our need to feel valued, competent, and accepted. When someone points out our flaws, it feels like a threat to that sense of worth. But what if we could reframe it entirely? What if criticism wasn't a wound but a window, showing us exactly where we can grow? This is where emotional maturity begins, in learning that criticism isn't personal, it's informational. The sting is natural. Let's start here. It's okay to feel the sting. When you receive negative feedback, your brain reacts as if you're under threat. That surge of discomfort, the racing thoughts, the defensive explanations forming in your mind, it's a natural human response. But maturity isn't about eliminating emotion. It's about what you do next. You can either spiral into self-criticism or pause long enough to ask, what truth might be hiding in this? That single question changes everything. Criticism as data. Think of feedback as data. Not judgment, not personal attack, just information. Every piece of feedback, no matter how harsh, contains insight. Sometimes it's about how others perceive you. Sometimes it's about a skill gap you can close. Sometimes it's even about the other person, revealing their expectations, preferences, or values. The key is to listen without defending and analyze without absorbing negativity. Extract the insight. Leave the emotion. Cultivating a growth mindset. People who scale the fastest, in business, relationships, or personal mastery, all share one belief: I can learn from anything. That's the essence of a growth mindset. It's understanding that feedback, even when it's painful, is fuel. It's evidence that you're in motion, that you're improving, that others are engaging with your journey. Instead of asking, why are they criticizing me? Shift to, what can I learn from this? This shift turns defensiveness into curiosity, and curiosity is the birthplace of transformation. Practical reflection. Think about the last piece of feedback you received that hurt. Maybe it was a comment on your work, your tone, or your leadership. What if, instead of reliving the sting, you looked for the insight within it? Ask yourself 3 questions. What part of this feedback might be true even if it's uncomfortable? How could applying this insight improve my performance or relationships? What emotion is attached to this, and what is it trying to teach me? When you turn feedback into data, pain becomes progress. Action step. This week, instead of avoiding feedback, seek it out. Ask a trusted colleague, mentor, or friend. What's one thing you think I could do better? Then just listen. Don't defend. Don't explain. Simply absorb. You'll be surprised how freeing it feels to hear feedback without fear, and how quickly it accelerates your growth once you detach your ego from the process. Chapter 2: Decode the Message, Extracting the Gold. Not all feedback is created equal. Some comments are thoughtful and precise. Others are vague, emotional, or poorly delivered. Yet, within every piece of feedback, even the most uncomfortable, there's something valuable waiting to be uncovered. The key is learning how to separate the message from the mess. This chapter is about developing the ability to decode feedback, to extract meaningful insight without getting lost in tone, delivery, or ego. When you learn this, you gain one of the most powerful competitive advantages in life and business: emotional intelligence under pressure. The art of emotional separation. When someone gives you criticism, it's easy to hear it through the filter of your emotions. You might focus on the way they said it rather than what they said. Maybe their tone felt condescending or their timing was poor. But here's a truth that separates those who grow from those who stay stuck. You don't need to like the messenger to value the message. Emotionally separating the content from the delivery is the foundation of decoding feedback. If a coach yells at an athlete, the tone may sting, but the insight, the misstep, the technical flaw, is what leads to improvement. If a client criticizes your work harshly, their words may lack tact, but their perception can reveal exactly what your market needs. Your job is not to defend your pride, it's to extract the gold. Focus on the what, not the how. When feedback comes in, pause. Then ask yourself, what are they actually trying to say? This question instantly pulls you out of emotion and into objectivity. Maybe your colleague says, "You're not a great listener." Instead of reacting with, "That's not true," ask, what specific behavior made them feel unheard? Did I interrupt, check my phone, or dismiss their point? What change would make this interaction more effective next time? This shift moves you from personal reaction to analytical reflection. You begin to see criticism as data for behavioral calibration, not an attack on your worth. Ask clarifying questions. When feedback feels vague, it's your responsibility to dig deeper. Most people struggle to articulate feedback clearly, often mixing emotion with observation. That's why the best communicators don't just listen, they clarify. Here's how. Can you give me an example of when that happened? What would improvement look like to you? If I could change one thing, what would make the biggest impact? These questions turn feedback into a conversation, not a confrontation. They help you understand intent, not just content. And in doing so, you strip away assumptions that often cause unnecessary defensiveness. The hidden layer, intent behind the words. Behind every piece of feedback lies an intention, though it's not always obvious. Some feedback comes from genuine care, others from frustration or projection. But even critical or emotionally charged feedback often reveals a deeper truth. The person cares enough to respond. When someone takes the time to give feedback, it means they see potential. They believe you can improve. Recognizing that intent can shift your mindset from resistance to gratitude. Even when the words sting, ask yourself, is there a lesson here I would miss if I focused only on how it was delivered? When you look for lessons instead of validation, you start to win faster than everyone else. Identify actionable takeaways. Feedback only creates value when it leads to action. So once you've separated emotion from information and clarified the message, ask, what specifically can I do with this insight? Turn vague statements into practical steps. For example, you need to be more confident, practice speaking slower and holding eye contact. Your reports are unclear, use bullet points and simplify technical language. You're too controlling, delegate one major responsibility this week and trust your team. The key is translation, converting abstract feedback into specific, measurable behavior changes. Not all feedback is equal. Some feedback deserves your full attention. Other feedback can be noted and released. Here's how to discern the difference. Relevance. Does this feedback align with your goals or core values? Credibility. Is the person qualified to give this feedback, or are they projecting their own limitations? Frequency. Have you heard similar feedback from multiple sources? If yes, it's likely worth addressing. Timing. Does the feedback come from a moment of emotion or thoughtful reflection? When you evaluate feedback through these lenses, you learn to filter noise from insight. Turning critique into curiosity. One of the greatest skills you can build is curiosity under pressure. When someone criticizes you, your first instinct may be to defend yourself, but curiosity disarms that instinct. Instead of "you're wrong," try asking, "That's interesting, what makes you say that?" This one sentence shifts the energy instantly. You transform from defensive to open, from reactive to reflective. And in doing so, you earn respect while learning faster. Curiosity turns critique into clarity. Embracing feedback as a mirror. Feedback is a mirror that reflects both how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Sometimes it confirms what you already know but haven't addressed. Other times it reveals blind spots, areas you can't see without an external perspective. The goal is not perfection but alignment. Aligning who you think you are with how you actually show up. The more you accept feedback as reflection instead of rejection, the more grounded and powerful you become. Action step. This week, practice decoding feedback in real time. When someone criticizes you, pause before responding and silently ask, what truth might exist in what they're saying? What can I learn from this? What specific behavior or system could I adjust as a result? Then write it down. Turn every piece of feedback into a micro-improvement. Over time, these tiny adjustments compound into massive transformation. The truth is, feedback isn't about judgment, it's about growth. Every critique contains a clue. Every uncomfortable moment holds a message. Once you learn to decode the message and extract the gold, feedback stops being something you fear and becomes something you welcome. Chapter 3: Strategic Absorption, Your Feedback Toolkit. Once you've learned how to decode feedback, the next step is mastering how to absorb it strategically, without losing your balance, your confidence, or your sense of self. Think of feedback like energy. If you absorb it correctly, it fuels growth. If you absorb it recklessly, it drains you. This chapter is about building the internal system that allows you to process feedback productively, turning moments of discomfort into structured, deliberate improvement. Why strategic absorption matters. Most people don't actually lack feedback, they lack the ability to handle it. A single negative comment can derail someone's confidence for days. One harsh remark can spiral into self-doubt or resentment. But the truth is, feedback itself isn't harmful. It's how you internalize it that determines its impact. Strategic absorption is about creating a buffer zone, a mental framework that lets feedback pass through you without destabilizing your emotions. You listen, evaluate, and decide what to keep, what to discard, and what to act on. It's not about building emotional walls. It's about building emotional filters. The pause, process, plan method. When feedback lands, especially when it stings, your first instinct will be to react. Maybe you want to explain, defend, or prove yourself right. But the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is simple. Pause. Pause. Take a breath before responding. Count to 5 if you need to. This momentary silence protects you from saying something impulsive and helps your brain shift from emotion to logic. Reaction is instinct. Reflection is intelligence. Process. Once you've calmed your emotions, break down what you heard. Ask yourself, what is the main point they're making? Is there a pattern or theme behind this feedback? How credible is this source? What assumptions might they be operating from? Processing helps you separate useful information from noise. Plan. Now decide your next move. What, if anything, needs to change? Do you need to adjust your behavior? Clarify a misunderstanding? Or simply thank them and move forward? The goal isn't to accept every piece of feedback. It's to respond with strategy. This method transforms emotional reactions into thoughtful decisions, a hallmark of maturity and leadership. The Thanks, Think, Take framework. This simple 3-step technique will change how people perceive you, especially in professional settings. Thanks. Express gratitude for the feedback, no matter how it's delivered. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate you taking the time. Gratitude disarms tension. It signals confidence, not submission. Think. Take time to reflect before acting. Don't commit to anything on the spot. Let me think through that and see how I can improve. This shows thoughtfulness and emotional control. Take. Extract the valuable parts and discard the rest. Every piece of feedback contains something useful, even if small. Take that insight, integrate it, and move on. With this approach, you stay grounded, professional, and growth-oriented, even when criticism feels personal. Recognize emotional triggers. Feedback often exposes emotional triggers, old patterns of insecurity or fear. Maybe you fear being judged, misunderstood, or seen as inadequate. Recognizing these triggers is essential for mastering feedback absorption. When feedback hits a nerve, it's not always because it's wrong. Sometimes it's because it's true. That sting is your ego alerting you to an area that needs attention. Instead of suppressing that emotion, observe it. Why does this bother me so much? Often you'll discover that the feedback resonates with something deeper, perhaps a standard you haven't met, or a belief about yourself that needs updating. Emotional awareness transforms vulnerability into insight. Create an internal scoring system. Not all feedback deserves equal weight. A smart strategy is to score feedback based on source, relevance, and frequency. Ask yourself, source, is this person qualified or experienced in the area they're criticizing? Relevance, does this feedback align with my personal or professional goals? Frequency, have I heard this feedback more than once from different people? If all three are high, it's likely valuable feedback. If not, you can thank them, reflect briefly, and move forward without internalizing it. Your time and energy are finite. Protect them by filtering wisely. Transforming feedback into action. Once you decide feedback is worth implementing, translate it into measurable steps. Let's say your manager says, "You need to communicate more clearly." Break it down. What does that mean? Maybe fewer filler words, clearer structure, more concise updates. How can you measure progress? Record yourself presenting, track audience engagement, or ask for follow-up feedback. What's the first step? Practice summarizing complex ideas in 60 seconds. Without this translation, feedback stays abstract. With it, feedback becomes a personalized growth plan. Don't let praise distract you. Absorbing feedback strategically isn't just about handling criticism. It's also about handling praise. Compliments feel good, but they can be dangerous if they lead to complacency. When someone praises you, absorb it with appreciation but also curiosity. Ask yourself, what specifically did I do well and how can I repeat it? That mindset turns praise from validation into calibration. Practice emotional detachment, not indifference. There's a fine line between being detached and being indifferent. Emotional detachment means you don't let feedback control your mood or self-worth. Indifference means you stop caring altogether. The goal is balance. Stay open to learning but anchored in your identity. You are not the feedback you receive. You are the person who decides what to do with it. Reflection exercise. Tonight, write down 3 pieces of feedback you've received recently, positive or negative. For each, ask, what's the core message? How did it make me feel and why? What specific action could I take based on it? What will I choose to keep and what will I release? Doing this regularly builds feedback resilience, a muscle that strengthens every time you use it. Strategic absorption is what separates emotionally reactive individuals from emotionally intelligent leaders. You stop being afraid of feedback because you know how to handle it. You don't crumble under criticism, you convert it. And when you master this skill, you become unstoppable. Chapter 4, Action and Accountability, Proving Your Growth. You've learned how to reframe feedback and absorb it strategically. But now comes the most crucial step, turning insight into action. Because feedback, no matter how valuable, means nothing if it doesn't translate into change. This chapter is about building the bridge between what you hear and what you do. It's where personal development becomes visible, measurable, and deeply empowering. Growth isn't proven by words, it's proven by consistent, intentional action. The feedback loop, from awareness to adjustment. Most people treat feedback like a one-time event. They hear it, react, and move on. But the most successful individuals turn feedback into a continuous loop. Here's how it works. Receive feedback with openness and curiosity. Reflect and plan how to apply it. Act deliberately on one specific area of improvement. Request follow-up feedback to assess progress. Then the loop starts again, refined, stronger, and more intentional each time. This is how growth compounds. Every cycle builds on the last, creating a self-reinforcing habit of learning, adjusting, and elevating. From passive listener to active implementer. Listening to feedback without implementing it is like buying a gym membership and never showing up. Awareness without action creates the illusion of growth but produces no real results. So how do you shift from passive listener to active implementer? Start small. Choose one actionable takeaway from the feedback you've received, not 10. If someone says your communication lacks clarity, start by summarizing your main points at the end of every meeting. If feedback suggests you need better time management, begin by blocking your calendar for deep work sessions. If you're told your leadership style is too reactive, practice pausing before responding to team issues. Small, specific, and consistent actions lead to visible transformation. Remember, change doesn't happen when you understand feedback. It happens when you apply it. The power of accountability. Accountability is the anchor that keeps your growth steady. It's easy to make promises to yourself in private. It's much harder to maintain them without someone watching. This is why accountability partners, mentors, or even team check-ins are so powerful. They introduce constructive pressure, the kind that pushes you to follow through. Tell someone you trust what you're working on. Share your goal and your plan for improvement. Then ask them to hold you accountable. When you know someone will check in, you're far more likely to take consistent action. Growth thrives in the light of accountability. It's not about seeking validation. It's about building momentum through shared responsibility. Tracking progress, evidence of change. Improvement is easier to maintain when you can see it. Create a system to measure your growth. Here are a few simple ways. Feedback journal. Write down what feedback you received, what you did about it, and what changed afterward. Progress metrics. If your goal is communication improvement, measure clarity through meeting outcomes or survey feedback. Weekly reflection. Ask yourself, what did I do differently this week based on the feedback I've received? Documenting your progress reinforces your motivation. It reminds you that growth is happening, even when it feels slow. When you can trace a clear line between criticism received and improvement made, you transform feedback into undeniable proof of evolution, turning feedback into a public strength. One of the most powerful yet underused ways to demonstrate growth is to show others you've implemented feedback. Let's say your manager once told you that your reports lacked structure. After improving, you could say, "Based on your earlier suggestion, I've restructured my report format for better clarity. Here's the new version." That sentence does three things at once. It shows humility, you listened. It demonstrates initiative, you acted. It earns respect, you evolved. When people see you respond constructively to feedback, their trust and confidence in you grow exponentially. You become known not just as talented but as teachable, and teachability is one of the most valuable traits in business and life. Follow-up feedback. The cycle of continuous improvement. Once you've acted on feedback, go back to the source. Ask for an update. "I've been focusing on improving my delivery in meetings. Have you noticed any difference lately?" This does two things. It shows maturity and accountability. It helps you measure your progress from an external perspective. Following up transforms feedback from a one-way conversation into an ongoing dialogue. It tells others you're serious about growth, and that you don't shy away from scrutiny. Over time, this reputation becomes a magnet for opportunity. People trust those who actively pursue better versions of themselves. Dealing with setbacks gracefully. Even with your best efforts, you'll occasionally stumble. Maybe the feedback doesn't land perfectly. Maybe your attempts to improve aren't noticed immediately. That's okay. Growth isn't linear, it's iterative. When setbacks happen, don't interpret them as failure. Instead, see them as calibration. Every misstep teaches you how to walk stronger next time. Ask yourself, what worked? What didn't? What can I tweak moving forward? This level of self-reflection keeps your confidence rooted in progress, not perfection. Transformation through consistency. The secret to mastering feedback lies not in massive, occasional changes, but in consistent micro-adjustments. One small improvement, applied repeatedly, reshapes your habits, your results, and ultimately your identity. Each time you act on feedback, you prove to yourself that growth is within your control. Each time you follow through, your confidence deepens. Eventually, you stop fearing criticism altogether, because you know exactly what to do with it. Action is the loudest form of feedback response. Anyone can listen. Few people implement. Even fewer sustain. Be the one who does. Because the moment you turn feedback into visible progress, you don't just silence your critics, you inspire them. Chapter 5. Cultivating a feedback-rich environment. Imagine walking into a workplace, a team, or even a family where honest communication flows effortlessly. Where people don't tiptoe around criticism and where mistakes aren't feared, they're studied, learned from, and used as stepping stones. That's a feedback-rich environment, and it's one of the most powerful ecosystems you can create for continuous growth and success. In a feedback-rich environment, improvement is not an event, it's a culture. People don't wait for annual reviews or crisis moments to speak up. They exchange insights in real time with the shared goal of making each other better. And here's the truth. No one reaches greatness alone. Every exceptional performer, entrepreneur, or leader thrives in an environment that challenges them, refines them, and pushes them to evolve, over and over again. This chapter will help you build that environment around yourself and for others. Why feedback-rich environments create accelerated growth. Most people resist feedback because it feels threatening. It implies something's wrong. But in a feedback-rich culture, feedback is normal, expected, welcomed, even celebrated. Think of feedback like oxygen, invisible, constant, and essential. In the right atmosphere, everyone breathes it naturally. When feedback becomes part of daily life, performance skyrockets. Teams collaborate better. Individuals adapt faster. Mistakes shrink faster than egos can grow. Feedback-rich environments eliminate one of the biggest growth killers, Silence. Silence allows mediocrity to hide. But feedback, consistent, compassionate, and direct, exposes blind spots before they turn into breakdowns. Starts with safety. The foundation of a feedback-rich environment is psychological safety. That means people feel secure enough to speak honestly, without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or rejection. You can't create honest feedback where people fear being judged. If someone thinks speaking up will cost them approval, they'll stay quiet. If they believe criticism will lead to conflict, they'll sugarcoat the truth. As a leader, a friend, or even within your own self-talk, you must create safety first. You do this by modeling humility, by showing that feedback doesn't hurt you, it helps you. Say things like, "I value your perspective. If you see something I can do better, please tell me." When people witness you receiving feedback calmly and gratefully, it gives them permission to do the same. Remember, safety breeds honesty. Honesty breeds growth. Ask more, assume less. Most people wait for feedback to find them. High performers go out and hunt for it. They don't assume others will tell them the truth, they invite it. Make it a habit to ask questions like, "What's one thing I could do better next time? Was there anything about my delivery that didn't land clearly? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done differently?" These questions lower defenses and open dialogue. Here's the secret. Asking for feedback not only gives you information, it builds trust. It shows others you're serious about excellence, not ego. When people see that their opinions are valued, they become more engaged, more invested, and more likely to share honest insights in the future. Encourage upward and peer feedback. In many workplaces, feedback flows only one way, from top to bottom. But that structure limits growth. True development happens when feedback flows in all directions. Encourage your peers and even your subordinates to give you input. Say, "I know I'm not perfect and I want to keep improving. What's one way I could support you better?" This disarms hierarchy. It humanizes leadership. When team members feel empowered to share upward feedback, everyone becomes part of the improvement cycle. Innovation accelerates. Miscommunication decreases. And suddenly, feedback becomes a shared responsibility, not a one-way obligation. Normalize feedback in daily conversations. Feedback shouldn't feel like a big event. It should feel like breathing, consistent, small, and essential. Don't save it for formal reviews or structured sessions. Integrate it into everyday moments. A quick comment after a meeting. A reflection after a presentation. A note of appreciation followed by a suggestion. The more casual and frequent feedback becomes, the less intimidating it feels. This builds a rhythm of continuous improvement, one that keeps everyone learning and adjusting without waiting for official permission to grow. Give feedback the right way. If you want to build a feedback-rich culture, you must also master how to give feedback effectively. Here's a simple formula. Start with context. Begin by clarifying why you're sharing feedback. "I want to share this because I think it could help your presentation land even stronger." Be specific, not vague. Instead of saying, "You need to communicate better," say, "I noticed your tone dropped toward the end. It made it harder for people to stay engaged." Balance the message. Start with what's working, then move to what can improve. This maintains motivation while driving improvement. And with belief. Reinforce confidence in their ability to improve. You've got real potential. This adjustment will make your impact even stronger. Effective feedback doesn't crush people. It clarifies the path forward. Recognize and reward openness. In many environments, people hide mistakes to avoid criticism. But in feedback-rich environments, mistakes are shared so everyone can learn. As a leader, celebrate those moments. Reward the person who says, "Here's what I missed and how I'm fixing it." Applaud transparency. Because when people see that honesty leads to growth, not punishment, they become fearless learners. The real strength of a team isn't perfection, it's collective learning. The mirror rule. To sustain a feedback-rich culture, you must embody what you expect from others. That means being the mirror, reflecting the same openness and humility you want to see. If someone offers you feedback, don't defend or dismiss it. Thank them, reflect, and act. When your behavior consistently models teachability, it sets the tone for everyone around you. Culture doesn't start with a slogan, it starts with example. Feedback beyond work. A feedback-rich mindset doesn't just transform organizations, it transforms lives. Imagine applying the same principles at home, in friendships, or even in your own self-reflection. Asking your partner, what could I do to make our communication stronger? Or telling yourself, what lesson is life trying to teach me through this setback? Feedback isn't just professional, it's personal evolution in motion. When you start viewing every interaction as potential feedback, every mistake, every success, every silence, life becomes your greatest teacher. Chapter 6. The Growth Multiplier, Turning Feedback into Long-Term Mastery. Feedback alone doesn't change you. What changes you is what you do with it, consistently, deliberately, over time. Most people treat feedback like a one-time fix. They adjust something, feel momentary improvement, and move on. But the truth is, mastery isn't built from moments, it's built from momentum. In this chapter, we'll go deeper, beyond simply accepting feedback, into how to compound it, transform it into wisdom, and use it as the ultimate growth multiplier in your personal and professional life. The feedback cycle: reflect, apply, evolve. Think of feedback as a loop, not a line. It doesn't end when you say, got it? That's when it begins. The feedback cycle has 3 essential parts: reflect, apply, evolve. Reflect. Sit with the message before reacting. What truth is hidden here? What does this reveal about how I operate? Where else does this pattern show up in my life? Reflection turns raw information into insight. Apply. Take one focused action based on what you've learned. Feedback means nothing if it never leaves the notebook. Even the smallest action proves to your mind, I'm evolving. Evolve, track your progress, adapt again, and refine further. Each cycle strengthens your awareness, your habits, and your resilience. Mastery isn't about perfection. It's about building systems that keep you improving automatically. Systematizing feedback. Make growth predictable. Most people rely on random moments of feedback. A boss comment, a friend's suggestion, a mistake they stumble upon. But true growth requires structure. You can't improve what you don't measure. Start by designing your feedback system. Here's how. Schedule reflection time. Set aside a few minutes weekly to review recent feedback or experiences. Ask yourself, what did I learn this week? What could I do better next week? What patterns keep repeating? Keep a feedback journal. Write down key pieces of feedback, both external and internal. Track what actions you took and the results you noticed. Over time, this journal becomes a roadmap of your evolution. Create feedback triggers. Build cues that remind you to seek feedback regularly. For example, after every presentation, ask one trusted peer for feedback. After every project, do a what worked/what didn't debrief. When feedback becomes part of your process, not a surprise, growth becomes predictable. Transform feedback into identity. The greatest shift happens when feedback stops being about performance and starts being about who you are becoming. Most people view feedback as judgment. I did something wrong. But growth-minded individuals translate it as, I'm learning to become better. This identity level shift is everything. Because once you identify as someone who learns fast, adapts easily, and uses feedback as fuel, every challenge becomes an opportunity. When you believe, I'm a feedback-driven person, you stop fearing criticism altogether. You start seeking it, craving it, using it as your compass toward mastery. Your self-worth no longer depends on being perfect. It depends on being progressive. From reaction to routine. Here's a truth many overlook. Your reaction to feedback matters more than the feedback itself. 2 people can receive the same critique. One feels attacked, the other feels guided. The difference isn't in the message, it's in the mindset. The goal is to shift from emotional reaction to intentional routine. When feedback hits, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself 3 questions. What part of this is useful to me? What part is just delivery, tone, timing, or bias? What will I do differently next time? Turning feedback into a routine means it no longer triggers your ego. It triggers your curiosity. And curiosity is the gateway to mastery. The feedback action bridge. Between receiving feedback and seeing improvement lies a dangerous gap: inaction. Many people collect feedback but never cross the bridge toward change. They agree with the advice but fail to apply it. To bridge that gap, use this simple method. Simplify the action. Choose one clear behavior to change, not 5. Example, instead of be more confident, choose maintain eye contact for 5 more seconds. Set a measurable goal. Quantify your improvement. I'll ask for feedback after every client call this month. I'll review my tone in 2 meetings each week. Create accountability. Share your goal with a friend or colleague. Ask them to check in on your progress. External accountability turns intention into execution. The compound effect of feedback. Here's where the magic happens. Each piece of feedback, when acted upon, doesn't just improve one skill, it improves your learning muscle. It compounds. That's why people who embrace feedback accelerate faster than everyone else. They're not just fixing mistakes, they're upgrading their learning speed. Imagine applying this for years. Each lesson builds on the last. Your awareness sharpens. Your emotional control strengthens. Your performance amplifies. What started as discomfort becomes your greatest competitive advantage. That's the compound effect of feedback. Small adjustments, multiplied by time, equal transformation. From external to internal feedback. In the beginning, feedback comes from others. Over time, it starts coming from within. As your awareness grows, you start catching yourself in real time, adjusting your tone mid-sentence, refining your decision mid-meeting, correcting your mindset mid-thought. That's when you've internalized feedback. You've turned external correction into internal guidance. You've become self-coaching. And when you reach that stage, your growth no longer depends on anyone else. You carry your own compass. That's what mastery feels like. Effortless course correction powered by awareness. The infinite learner's mindset. There's no finish line in growth. Every achievement simply reveals the next level of refinement. The world's top performers, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, share one defining trait. They never graduate from feedback. They live in a constant state of curiosity. Every success is analyzed. Every failure dissected. Every moment mined for lessons. That's how they stay ahead, not by being the best once, but by becoming better always. When you adopt the infinite learner's mindset, feedback becomes your lifelong companion, not your enemy. You stop chasing validation and start chasing evolution. Mastery isn't the goal, it's the path. In the end, feedback mastery isn't about reaching some perfect version of yourself. It's about building a life that constantly refines itself. It's about becoming the kind of person who can face truth without fear, adapt without shame, and grow without limit. So keep the loop alive, reflect, apply, evolve. Because mastery isn't a moment, it's a rhythm. A rhythm of humility, curiosity, and courage. And once you learn to dance with feedback, you don't just grow, you transform. Chapter 7, Emotional Intelligence. Mastering Ego and Vulnerability. No matter how strong, experienced, or confident you are, feedback can still sting. Because at its core, criticism isn't just about your work. It feels like it's about you. When someone points out your flaws, your brain doesn't see it as information. It sees it as a threat. It triggers the same fight or flight response that danger does. Your heart races. Your chest tightens. Your instinct whispers, defend yourself. This is where most people lose the battle. They protect their ego instead of protecting their growth. But the truth is, feedback doesn't hurt your value. It reveals your value if you're willing to listen through the noise. In this chapter, we'll unpack the emotional side of feedback, how to stay grounded, open, and powerful even when criticism feels personal. Because the real mastery isn't in how you respond out loud, it's in how you respond internally. Ego, the invisible barrier to growth. The ego is like armor. It's built to protect you, but sometimes it protects you from progress. When you hear criticism, your ego rushes in with thoughts like, they don't understand me. That's not true. I've already improved on that. Sound familiar? That's not logic speaking. That's your ego trying to shield you from discomfort. But here's the paradox. Every time your ego wins, your growth loses. Because while your ego keeps you safe, it also keeps you stagnant. The first step to emotional intelligence and feedback is recognizing when your ego is taking the wheel. Notice it, name it, and remind yourself, I don't need to defend my worth, I'm here to improve it. The power of pause, emotional control in real time. When feedback triggers you, the most powerful tool you have is silence. That single pause, the moment between reaction and response, is where growth happens. Here's a method you can use instantly. Breathe before you respond. Let your body catch up to your brain. A few seconds of controlled breathing can reset your emotions completely. Acknowledge, don't argue. Say, I appreciate that insight. You don't have to agree, just acknowledge. Detach from the tone, focus on the message. Maybe the delivery wasn't ideal. Maybe it came out harsh. But ask yourself, is there something useful here anyway? Every time you choose composure over reaction, you train emotional strength. And emotional strength is what separates amateurs from leaders. Vulnerability, the secret strength. Most people see vulnerability as weakness, especially in professional settings. But the truth is, vulnerability is what gives feedback its power. It takes courage to say, "I didn't know that." It takes strength to admit, "You're right, I can improve here." Vulnerability is not about exposing your flaws, it's about showing your commitment to growth. And the moment you start owning your imperfections, two things happen. People trust you more. You learn faster than anyone else. Because the ego resists what vulnerability invites: connection, collaboration, and transformation. Emotional detachment versus emotional awareness. Many people confuse emotional detachment with emotional intelligence. They think being tough means not feeling anything at all. But emotional mastery isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about understanding them. Instead of ignoring your emotions, observe them. Ask yourself, why does this feedback bother me so much? What part of my identity feels threatened? Is this discomfort pointing me toward something I need to face? Emotional awareness turns feedback into a mirror, reflecting truths about your growth areas that logic alone can't reveal. Because feedback doesn't just challenge your skills, it challenges your self-image. And if you can face that image honestly, you become unstoppable. Reframing emotional triggers. Let's look at a real example. Imagine you're told, you come across as too aggressive in meetings. Your first reaction might be frustration. "I'm just passionate." But instead of defending, reframe the trigger. What behaviors make people interpret my passion as aggression? Now you've moved from reaction to reflection. You've taken control of your growth narrative. Every emotional trigger you face in feedback hides a powerful lesson. Your goal isn't to silence your emotions, it's to decode them. The emotional reset, building inner calm. When criticism hits hard, your body holds on to it. The tension in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach. These are signs your nervous system is in defense mode. To reset your emotional baseline, try these quick grounding techniques. Box breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold again for 4. It centers your body and slows emotional flooding. Label the feeling. Simply naming the emotion, "I feel defensive," "I feel embarrassed," can lessen its intensity. Anchor with gratitude. End your reflection by acknowledging one thing you appreciate about the feedback. This shifts your focus from pain to progress. Over time, you'll build emotional muscle memory, where calm becomes your natural default. When feedback feels unfair. Let's be real, not all feedback is fair. Some comes from bias, projection, or misunderstanding. But even unfair feedback has value, if you approach it correctly. Ask yourself, what part of this is opinion and what part might still be useful? How can I respond gracefully without absorbing unnecessary negativity? What does my reaction teach me about myself? You don't have to agree with feedback to grow from it. You just have to stay open enough to extract the gold even from the dirt. Respond with composure, not defensiveness. Because your reaction reveals more about your professionalism than the feedback ever could. The emotional echo, what you project returns. There's an unspoken truth about feedback. The way you receive it affects the way others give it. If you respond with gratitude and openness, people will feel safe giving you honest insights. But if you react defensively, they'll hold back, and you'll lose valuable information. Emotional intelligence creates a ripple effect. Your calm presence encourages others to be more transparent. And over time, this builds a culture of truth, whether in your team, your family, or your own self-talk. You train the world how to communicate with you, one reaction at a time. Your emotional compass. Here's a powerful mindset shift. Every time feedback makes you uncomfortable, it's pointing directly toward your next level. Discomfort is your emotional compass. If something triggers you, it's highlighting an area of untapped growth. So instead of asking, "Why does this hurt?" ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single reframe turns emotional pain into emotional power. Final reflection. The emotionally intelligent person doesn't avoid criticism. They master it by separating their worth from their performance, their feelings from their reactions, and their ego from their evolution. When you can listen without defense, reflect without resentment, and grow without guilt, you've achieved one of the rarest skills in life. Emotional maturity. Because feedback will always find you, but emotional intelligence ensures it never breaks you. It only builds you. Chapter 8. Building a feedback-driven culture. Creating environments that thrive on growth. Mastering feedback begins within, but true transformation happens when it spreads around you. It's one thing to handle criticism gracefully, It's another to build a world where honest feedback flows freely, respectfully, and consistently. Whether you lead a team, run a business, or simply want to improve the communication in your relationships, cultivating a feedback-driven culture is one of the most powerful leadership skills you can develop. Because growth shouldn't depend on one person's willingness to improve, it should become part of the environment itself. The foundation, redefining what feedback means. In most organizations, feedback has a bad reputation. It's often associated with correction, criticism, or judgment. People brace for it. They prepare defenses instead of curiosity. And yet, feedback, when used correctly, is simply information for improvement. That's it. No judgment, no ego, no shame. A feedback-driven culture begins by redefining that truth. Feedback isn't a punishment, it's a performance enhancer. It's not personal, it's positional. It helps align you closer to your best self and highest potential. When that belief becomes shared across a team or family, feedback transforms from a threat into a tool. Leading by example, modeling receptivity. Every culture takes its cue from its leader. And leadership doesn't require a title. It starts with influence. If you want others to give and receive feedback openly, you must go first. Ask for feedback, publicly, sincerely, and often. And when you receive it, respond with gratitude, not defensiveness. Say things like, "That's helpful, I hadn't considered it from that angle. I appreciate your honesty. I'll reflect on that." These small phrases send a massive message. Feedback isn't dangerous here. It's safe. When people see that criticism doesn't trigger retaliation or resentment, they begin to open up too. They start contributing more honestly, collaborating more effectively, and thinking more creatively. Because a team that isn't afraid to speak truth is a team that moves fast. The cycle of trust. Feedback can't exist without trust. And trust can't exist without vulnerability. When you invite feedback, especially as a leader, you're saying, "I trust you to help me grow." That humility disarms hierarchy. It builds connection. Over time, this creates what psychologists call a psychologically safe environment. A space where people feel free to speak up without fear of humiliation or punishment. In that kind of environment, mistakes become data, not disasters. And accountability becomes mutual, not one-sided. Because when trust is present, feedback stops feeling like confrontation. It feels like collaboration. How to normalize feedback in everyday interactions. You don't need formal reviews or big meetings to build a feedback-driven culture. It starts with micro-moments, everyday interactions that reinforce openness. Here's how. Ask for feedback casually. After a meeting, ask a teammate, "Was that clear?" Or, "How could I make that smoother next time?" Offer feedback in real time. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The closer feedback is to the action, the more valuable it becomes. Balance correction with recognition. Praise effort and highlight progress as often as you address mistakes. People are more open to feedback when they feel seen for their growth. Encourage peer-to-peer feedback. It shouldn't always flow top-down. Empower everyone to both give and receive insight. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to reinforce that growth isn't occasional, it's ongoing. Creating clear guidelines, the feedback code. A healthy feedback culture isn't chaotic. It has structure, clarity, and shared rules that everyone understands. Here's a simple framework you can use, whether in a company or community. The feedback code. Intent before content. Make sure feedback is meant to help, not harm. Specific, not vague. Focus on observable actions, not personality traits. Future-focused. Don't dwell on blame. Discuss what can improve next time. Two-way street. Both parties should have a voice in the conversation. Respect always. No tone of attack even when being direct. When everyone knows the code, feedback becomes less emotional and more effective. It shifts from confrontation to collaboration, from judgment to growth. The role of recognition. There's a hidden element in feedback culture that many leaders miss: celebration. If all your feedback is corrective, people will associate it with failure. But if it's balanced with recognition, they'll associate it with growth. A simple, "I noticed how much better you handled that client today," goes further than any formal review. Recognition is the fuel that keeps the feedback engine running. Because when people feel appreciated, they want to improve. They feel safe to take risks, try again, and refine their skills. In short, positive reinforcement sustains a feedback culture. Negative feedback alone destroys it. dealing with resistance. Even in the best environments, some people will resist feedback. Maybe they've been burned before. Maybe their confidence is fragile. The key is patience and consistency. Keep modeling calm, constructive feedback. Don't force it, invite it. Over time, consistent fairness dissolves resistance. When people see that your intent is genuine, not judgmental, their walls come down. And remember, you don't need everyone to embrace it at first. You just need a few believers. Culture spreads through example, not enforcement. Feedback in relationships, beyond the workplace. The same principles apply to personal life. Healthy relationships, whether romantic, familial, or social, rely on honest, compassionate feedback. When you say, "I feel unheard," when you interrupt, you're not attacking, you're inviting growth. When you say, "I appreciate that you listen more this time," you reinforce positive change. Feedback is the heartbeat of connection. It's how people learn how to love, respect, and support each other better. Whether in business or life, the absence of feedback breeds assumption. And assumption breeds distance. So if you care about someone, tell them the truth kindly. Turning feedback into a shared identity. In a feedback-driven culture, growth stops being an individual goal, it becomes a collective identity. People start saying things like, "We don't fear feedback here. We improve together. We speak with honesty and listen with respect." When feedback becomes part of the culture's language, improvement becomes automatic. You no longer have to push people toward excellence, they pull themselves. That's when you know you've built something powerful. A system that scales self-awareness, honesty, and progress without external pressure. Final reflection. Building a feedback-driven culture isn't about policies or pep talks. It's about trust, vulnerability, and example. It's about turning criticism into collaboration and replacing defensiveness with curiosity. Chapter 9, The Feedback Loop, Turning Reflection into Continuous Growth. Receiving feedback once is an event. Using feedback repeatedly, that's a system. The difference between people who improve occasionally and those who evolve constantly isn't talent, luck, or timing. It's the ability to close the loop, to take feedback, apply it, measure the results, and refine again. In this chapter, we explore how to turn the act of receiving feedback into a habitual growth engine. One that keeps you improving without waiting for anyone else to push you. Because the most successful individuals don't just react to feedback, they engineer it into their lives. The missing piece: why growth often stops after feedback. Most people treat feedback as a one-time fix. They listen, nod, make a few adjustments, and move on. But growth doesn't happen in a single cycle. It happens through iteration. Think about elite athletes. They don't stop practicing after one coaching session. They practice, review, adjust, and repeat every single day. That's what the feedback loop is. A rhythm of reflection, adjustment, and refinement that compounds improvement over time. Without it, even the best advice fades. With it, small insights become massive transformations. Step 1. Reflection, turning input into insight. Reflection is where raw feedback turns into clarity. You've received the critique, now it's time to digest it. Ask yourself these questions after any meaningful feedback. What part of this resonates as true even if uncomfortable? What blind spots did this reveal about me? How can this information guide my next step? Don't rush the process. Reflection is the bridge between hearing and learning. A powerful tool to deepen your reflection is journaling. Write down what you learned, how it made you feel, and what you plan to do differently. Putting it on paper does two things. It slows down your thinking enough to find patterns. It externalizes emotion, turning feelings into actionable insight. In essence, journaling turns feedback from a moment into a mirror. Step 2. Action. Implementing without overthinking. Once you've reflected, move quickly into action. Feedback loses power the longer you wait to apply it. The key here isn't to fix everything at once. It's to focus on one or two high-impact changes. What's the single smallest action I can take right now that moves me closer to improvement? Maybe it's changing how you communicate in meetings. Maybe it's practicing your presentation tone. Maybe it's being more concise in emails. Small actions are deceptively powerful because they create momentum. And momentum, once built, naturally fuels consistency. Step 3. Measurement. Track the change. Feedback becomes progress only when it's measurable. Otherwise, it remains abstract, just another good idea lost to memory. To measure effectively, define what success looks like before you start. Ask yourself, what outcome am I hoping to see? How will I know I've improved? Who can confirm my progress from the outside? It could be as simple as asking a colleague, do you notice any difference in how I handle client feedback lately? When people confirm your growth, the feedback loop strengthens. Because validation turns improvement into identity. You no longer just want to improve, you see yourself as someone who always does. Step 4. Recalibration. Keep evolving. Here's the final step most people skip. Recalibration. Once you've applied the feedback and made progress, it's time to step back and review again. What worked? What didn't? What's next? Recalibration ensures that your growth doesn't plateau. It keeps your mindset fresh and your strategy relevant. Every improvement, no matter how small, opens the door to the next one. That's how exponential growth happens, not through leaps but through layers. Recalibration transforms feedback from a cycle into a spiral. Each turn taking you higher, refining your skills, and expanding your potential. The compounding effect of feedback. Think of feedback as compound interest for personal development. Each cycle of receiving, applying, and refining multiplies the value of the last. What feels like small improvements today becomes a complete transformation over time. Let's say you improve just 1% each week by acting on feedback. That doesn't sound like much. But by the end of a year, you'll be over 67% better than where you started, not because of huge changes but because you kept the loop alive. That's the magic of compound growth. Consistency beats intensity. The role of self-feedback. You won't always have mentors, coaches, or managers giving you feedback. That's why you must learn to self-generate it. Ask yourself regularly, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? If I were my own mentor, what would I tell myself right now? This simple daily check-in keeps your internal feedback engine running. You become both the student and the teacher, constantly refining your craft. Because the ultimate goal of mastering feedback isn't dependency on others. It's self-awareness so sharp that you can spot and correct your own blind spots in real time. Building systems around the feedback loop. If you want this to become second nature, make it a system. Here's how you can structure your personal feedback loop. Weekly reflection. Every week, set aside 15 minutes to review what feedback you received and how you acted on it. Monthly check-in. Choose one theme of growth per month. Communication, time management, leadership, etc., and track measurable progress. Quarterly review. Ask mentors or peers for updates on how they've perceived your evolution. This keeps external accountability in sync with internal effort. Systems create consistency, and consistency creates mastery. When feedback becomes a scheduled habit instead of an occasional event, progress becomes automatic. Feedback is a lifelong rhythm. At some point, you stop needing motivation to grow. You evolve simply because that's who you are now. That's the beauty of the feedback loop. It rewires your identity. You become someone who seeks clarity over comfort, improvement over ego, and truth over pride. You no longer wait for people to tell you what's wrong. You look for what can be better. That's when growth stops being effort and starts being instinct. Final reflection. Continuous growth isn't about chasing perfection. It's about mastering the loop between awareness and action. Feedback, reflection, implementation, and recalibration. These are the gears of lasting evolution. And once they're in motion, they never stop. So the next time someone gives you feedback, don't see it as judgment. See it as the next revolution of your personal growth cycle. Because when you keep the loop alive, you don't just grow. You transform. You become the kind of person who doesn't fear criticism, doesn't stagnate, and doesn't wait for permission to improve. You become your own feedback engine. Powered by awareness, refined by action, and unstoppable by design. Chapter 10, Legacy of Growth. Elevating others through feedback. You've learned how to take criticism without breaking. You've learned to extract wisdom from discomfort. You've turned feedback from pain into power, and now it's time to go beyond yourself. Because true mastery of feedback doesn't stop at self-improvement. It blossoms into leadership. The final evolution of growth is the ability to elevate others through what you've learned. This is where feedback becomes legacy. The ripple effect of a growth mindset. Every time you handle feedback with grace, you send a signal. To your team, your peers, your family, everyone watching learns something about what growth looks like. Your calmness when criticized teaches emotional regulation. Your openness to learning teaches humility. Your commitment to improvement teaches courage. The people around you don't just hear your words, they mirror your behavior. That's the ripple effect. It starts quietly with how you respond to one piece of feedback. But over time, it spreads, reshaping the culture of every space you enter. Becoming a feedback leader. A feedback leader isn't defined by title. They're defined by energy. They create spaces where people feel safe to be honest, safe to fail, and safe to improve. That safety doesn't come from rules, it comes from the way you model it. When someone gives you feedback and you respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness, it invites trust. When you thank people for their honesty, you teach them that truth is valued more than comfort. And when you give feedback with empathy and intention, you transform conversations from confrontation into collaboration. That's what leadership really is, not control but elevation. The art of giving transformative feedback. Now that you've mastered receiving feedback, it's time to learn the art of giving it. Because the same principles apply in reverse. Here's how to make your feedback land with impact, not resistance. Start with safety. Create an emotional space where the person feels valued, not attacked. Remember, feedback should feel like guidance, not judgment. Lead with observation, not accusation. Say, "I've noticed," instead of "you always." Specificity removes ego from the equation and keeps the focus on behavior, not identity. Balance truth with belief. The goal isn't just to correct mistakes, it's to reinforce potential. Always pair critique with confidence in their ability to grow. Close the loop. Follow up. Ask, "How did that change work out for you?" Feedback without follow-up feels transactional. Feedback with follow-up builds transformation. When you master this balance, direct but compassionate, honest but hopeful, people don't resist your feedback, they seek it out. That's the mark of a true leader. Building a culture that thrives on feedback. Imagine a team, a company, or even a community where feedback isn't feared, it's fuel. That kind of environment doesn't just appear, it's built intentionally. And it starts with a few key habits. Normalize feedback early and often. Make it part of the routine, not just something that happens after mistakes. When feedback becomes a rhythm, it loses its sting. Reward growth, not just results. Celebrate people not only for what they achieved but how they improved along the way. This shifts the focus from perfection to progress. Encourage upward feedback. Invite your team to challenge your ideas respectfully. The best leaders aren't surrounded by yes men, they're surrounded by truth tellers. When feedback flows freely in all directions, hierarchy dissolves, innovation flourishes, and everyone rises together. Turning feedback into mentorship. At this stage, feedback evolves into something deeper. Mentorship. You begin to see the same struggles you once faced in others. And instead of criticizing, you coach. You use your experiences, the times you stumbled, the lessons you learned, the resilience you built, to help others find their footing faster. The best mentors don't just give advice, they share their process. They let others see their imperfections and progress. That transparency humanizes growth. It shows that improvement isn't linear or flawless, but ongoing. When you become a mentor through feedback, your influence outlives your performance. Your growth becomes the foundation of someone else's breakthrough. Feedback as a mirror of legacy. Think about this for a moment. When people remember you, how will they describe your impact? Will they say you were perfect? Probably not. But they might say you made them better. And that, more than any title, award, or number, is the ultimate legacy. Because feedback at its core is an act of service. When you give it, you invest in someone's future. When you receive it, you honor their honesty and commitment to your growth. It's a cycle of contribution, a shared evolution. The moment you use feedback to lift others, you step into a role bigger than yourself. You become a catalyst, a multiplier of potential. Full circle, the journey from criticism to empowerment. You started this journey afraid of criticism. You saw feedback as judgment, maybe even rejection. But now you understand. Feedback was never about you being wrong. It was about you becoming better. You've learned to listen without ego, to act without fear, to grow without end. And in doing so, you've not only mastered feedback, you've mastered yourself. Because growth isn't about fixing who you are. It's about revealing who you were always meant to be. The final message. So, as this audiobook closes, remember this truth. Every word of feedback you receive is a mirror, reflecting not your flaws but your potential. Every moment of discomfort is an invitation to rise higher. And every person you help grow through honest, empathetic feedback adds to the legacy you leave behind. Never stop seeking, never stop improving, and never stop sharing what you've learned. Because the world doesn't just need people who can take feedback. It needs people who can give it with love, live it with integrity, and use it to lift others higher. That's your calling now. That's your legacy. That's the power of mastering feedback, turning criticism into growth and growth into greatness.